What a joke! Agatha's voice echoed through the silent church as Sarah placed a small bag of coins into the offering plate. "Sarah, dear, we're trying to build a new roof, not buy a stick of gum." The congregation chuckled, and Sarah's 3 triplet daughters turned red with shame. "It's all we have," Sarah whispered. "Then maybe you should have stayed home," Agatha sneered. From the back pew, a well-dressed man no one recognized slowly stood up. "But before we see what happens next, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get into the full story." $24.75. 9-year-old Zoe Johnson whispered, counting the coins one last time. "Do you think it's enough to fix the church roof?" "Of course it is," her sister Zoe said, puffing out her chest. "We've been saving for 3 whole months." Their third sister, Zara, carefully closed the glass jar. "Actually, the church needs $250,000 for the roof. Our money is only a small part." The identical triplets sat on their small bedroom floor in their Boston apartment. Each wore a second-hand blue dress saved specially for church. Their mother, Sarah Johnson, appeared in the doorway. "Girls, it's time to go. The bus comes in 10 minutes." Sarah, 35 years old, wore a simple dress, and her curly hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Dark circles under her eyes showed her exhaustion from working long hours as a web developer to support her daughters. "Mom, do you think the church will like our money?" Zoe asked, the most sensitive of the 3. Sarah smiled. "Your donation comes from your hearts. That makes it special." Across town in Boston's historic district, Thomas Grant adjusted his simple but expensive suit in the mirror of his hotel room. At 38 years old, his dark hair showed touches of early gray. His phone buzzed with messages from his company, but he ignored them. Today was important for reasons beyond business. Thomas drove his rental car to St. Matthew's Church, arriving early. The historic building with its white steeple needed obvious repairs. Water stains marked the ceiling, and buckets caught drips in 3 corners. Pastor Michael Wilson, a kind-looking man in his 60s, greeted him at the door. "Mr. Grant, thank you for coming early." They walked to the pastor's office, a small room with old furniture and many books. "So you want your donation to remain anonymous?" Pastor Wilson asked. "Yes," Thomas said. "I'll match every dollar donated today, but please don't announce my name." "That's very generous. May I ask why the anonymity?" Thomas looked out the window. "Let's just say I have personal connections to this church that I'm not ready to reveal." In her large house in the wealthy part of Boston, Agatha Williams studied her reflection. At 55, her blonde hair was perfectly styled. Her designer dress and expensive jewelry were chosen to impress. As chairperson of the fundraising committee for 10 years, she knew appearances mattered. Her assistant, Eleanor Parker, a 40-year-old woman with kind eyes, organized donation cards on a clipboard. "I've listed all the major donors first," Eleanor said. "Perhaps this time we could recognize all contributions equally?" Agatha laughed. "People don't donate to be equal, Eleanor. They donate to be seen and appreciated based on what they give." Eleanor frowned but said nothing more. By 11 o'clock, St. Matthew's Church was filled with people. Wealthy families sat in the front pews in designer clothes. Middle-class families filled the middle section. Those with less money, like Sarah and her daughters, sat in the back. The triplets watched everything with wide eyes. "Look at that big crack in the ceiling," Zara whispered, pointing up. "Our money will help fix that," Zoe said confidently. Sarah squeezed their hands, trying to hide her nervousness. She recognized many wealthy people from around Boston. Their donations would be hundreds or thousands of dollars. Would her daughters be embarrassed by their small jar of coins? At the front of the church, Pastor Wilson welcomed everyone. "Today we gather as one community to help repair our beloved church. The roof has served us for 120 years, but now needs our help. We need $250,000 for complete repairs." He spoke about community and supporting each other before introducing Agatha Williams for the fundraising portion. Agatha walked to the microphone in her expensive blue dress, jewelry sparkling under the church lights. "Welcome to our annual fundraiser," she said with a wide smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Today we'll record each donation for our new roof. Let's begin with our most dedicated supporters." From the back row, Thomas Grant watched silently. He had slipped in just before the service began, sitting alone where few would notice him. His eyes weren't on Agatha, but on the back row where Sarah sat with 3 identical girls in matching blue dresses. His daughters, the daughters he hadn't seen in person for 5 years. Agatha began calling forward donors by name. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson," she announced. A well-dressed older couple walked to the front. "The Hendersons donate $5,000, Agatha declared into the microphone, leading applause. "Their generosity will help ensure our beautiful church stands for another century." The couple smiled and returned to their seats. "The Wilson family," Agatha called next. Another wealthy family approached. "The Wilsons contribute $10,000, Agatha said, her voice theatrical. "Such incredible generosity." The pattern continued. Each wealthy donor received excessive praise from Agatha. With each announcement, Sarah grew more uncomfortable. She felt the small jar of coins grow heavier in her hands. In the middle of the church, Mrs. Gladys Thompson, a 70-year-old Sunday school teacher, noticed Sarah's discomfort. She turned and gave the family an encouraging smile. "The Martinez family," Agatha called. A middle-class family approached with a check. "The Martinez family gives $300, Agatha announced, her smile slightly smaller. "Thank you for your contribution." The difference in her tone was obvious. In the back pew, Zoe whispered, "Mom, are they going to call us?" "Yes, sweetheart. Everyone who wants to donate gets called." "I'm nervous," Zoe admitted. Zoe put her arm around her sister. "Don't be scared. We worked hard for our money." Zara nodded seriously. "It's not about how much. It's about helping." Thomas watched this interaction, learning about his daughters through their words. The confident one, the sensitive one, the thoughtful one. His chest tightened with regret for the years he had missed. Agatha continued calling names, working through her list. The donations grew smaller as she moved to the back sections of the church. "The Johnson family," she finally called. Sarah took a deep breath and stood. The triplets rose with her, Zoe carrying their precious jar of coins. They walked slowly toward the front, feeling everyone's eyes on them. Thomas sat forward, heart pounding as he watched his family approach Agatha. The triplets stood proudly before the collection table. Zoe carefully placed their jar of coins beside the envelopes and checks from other donors. "This is from me and my sisters," she said in a small voice. "We saved it to help fix the roof." For a moment, Agatha stared at the jar of coins. Her practiced smile disappeared. "Is that all you're giving?" she asked, her voice carrying through the church microphone. "We need to fix a roof, not buy candy." The church fell silent. Zoe's eyes immediately filled with tears. Zoe's face turned red with anger. Zara stood frozen, looking down at her shoes. Sarah stepped forward protectively. "The girls saved for months." "Perhaps," Agatha interrupted, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "those who can't contribute meaningfully should just observe rather than participate." The cruel words echoed through the silent church. Pastor Wilson stepped forward quickly. "Every gift is meaningful, Mrs. Williams. Thank you, Johnson family, for your generous hearts." But the damage was done. Zoe was openly crying now. Sarah put her arms around her daughters and guided them back toward their seats, her face burning with humiliation. From the back of the church, Thomas Grant watched, his hands clenched into fists. The pain and humiliation on his daughters' faces cut straight to his heart. Mrs. Thompson reached out to squeeze Sarah's hand as they passed her pew. Eleanor, Agatha's assistant, looked deeply uncomfortable but continued helping Agatha with her list. Throughout the church, people shifted awkwardly in their seats. Many looked disapprovingly at Agatha, but no one spoke up. Agatha continued as if nothing had happened, calling the next family forward. "The Patterson family," she announced, smoothing her dress. "Let's see what proper generosity looks like." In the back pew, Thomas Grant made a decision that would change everything. "The Patterson family," Agatha announced, smoothing her expensive dress. "Let's see what proper generosity looks like." From his seat in the back pew, Thomas unclenched his fists and took a deep breath. The sight of his daughter's tears had awakened something inside him, a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. He watched as Sarah comforted the girls, her arm wrapped around Zoe, who continued to cry quietly. The Patterson family walked confidently to the front of the church. Mr. Patterson, a tall man in an expensive suit, handed Agatha an envelope with a flourish. "The Patterson family donates $15,000, Agatha declared, her voice ringing through the church. The crowd applauded politely. "Now this is the kind of contribution that will truly save our roof." Eleanor, standing beside Agatha, shifted uncomfortably. She glanced toward the back of the church where Sarah sat with her daughters. The triplets huddled close to their mother, Zoe's shoulders still shaking with quiet sobs. "Next, the Collins family," Agatha called. Another wealthy family approached. As they handed over their check, Agatha's smile widened. "The Collins family gives $8,000. Such wonderful generosity from our devoted members." In the back pew, Sarah whispered to her daughters, "Are you okay, girls?" Zoe wiped her eyes. "She was mean to us, Mom." "I wanted to tell her our money is important too," Zoe said, her small face still flushed with anger. Zara, always the thoughtful one, looked at her sisters. "She doesn't understand that we gave everything we had." Sarah hugged them closer. "I'm so proud of you three. What you gave came from your hearts, and that matters more than the amount." Thomas watched this interaction from several rows away. The gentle way Sarah comforted the girls, the different personalities of his daughters. He was learning about his family through their pain, and it broke his heart. He should have been there all these years, protecting them from moments like this. "The Lawrence family," Agatha called next. A middle-class family walked forward with a modest envelope. $500 from the Lawrences, Agatha announced, her voice noticeably less enthusiastic. "Thank you for your contribution." Pastor Wilson stepped closer to the microphone. "Every gift helps us reach our goal. Thank you, Lawrences." His attempt to equalize the recognition was obvious, but Agatha quickly took control again, calling the next family. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly Sunday school teacher, left her seat and quietly moved to sit beside the Johnson family. She reached out and patted Zoe's hand. "When I was a little girl," she whispered to the triplets, "my grandmother taught me that giving from your heart is what matters most. Your gift was beautiful." Zoe gave her a small smile through her tears. Agatha continued announcing donations, each time making subtle comments, comparing larger donations to smaller ones. The pattern was clear. Wealthy donors received lavish praise, while those with smaller contributions were barely acknowledged. Thomas noticed several congregation members exchanging uncomfortable glances, but no one challenged Agatha. Her social power in the church was obvious. After 30 minutes of announcements, Agatha's list was nearly complete. She looked over the collection table with a critical eye. "And now," she said into the microphone, "I'll announce our total for today." Eleanor handed her a calculator. Agatha punched numbers with her manicured fingernails, her expression growing increasingly disappointed. "Today we've raised $87,450, she announced. "Quite disappointing, considering we need $250,000 for the roof repairs." She looked directly at the congregation, her gaze sweeping over the middle and back rows. "Perhaps if everyone had contributed more meaningfully, we would have reached our goal." Pastor Wilson quickly stepped forward. "That's an excellent start. We're grateful for every donation, large and small. Together, we'll reach our goal over the next few fundraisers." "I suppose we'll have to," Agatha replied with a tight smile. "For now, please join us in the church hall for refreshments." The congregation stood and began moving toward the hall. Sarah held her daughter's hands as they waited for others to exit first. The girls' heads were lowered, still feeling the sting of humiliation. Thomas watched them, anger and determination building inside him. The decision he had made moments earlier was now set in stone. He stood and approached Pastor Wilson, who was gathering papers at the pulpit. "Pastor Wilson," Thomas said quietly, "I'd like to address the congregation during refreshments." Pastor Wilson looked surprised. "Mr. Grant, are you sure? I thought you wanted to remain anonymous." "Plans have changed," Thomas replied firmly. "What just happened to those little girls? That changes everything." In the church hall, round tables were set up with refreshments. Church members gathered in small groups, talking quietly. Many glanced towards Sarah and the triplets, who sat alone at a corner table with cookies they barely touched. Agatha held court among wealthy members, subtly blaming the disappointing turnout on insufficient participation from certain members. Eleanor stood beside her, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Mrs. Thompson brought the triplets cups of punch. "Would you like to help me set up for Sunday school tomorrow?" she asked them kindly. "I could use 3 helpful assistants." Zoe nodded silently. Zoe shrugged. Zara said, "Maybe we can help you fix things without spending much money." Mrs. Thompson smiled at them. "That's exactly what I need. Creative helpers with big hearts." Across the room, Thomas watched this interaction. He saw how kind Mrs. Thompson was being to his daughters. He noticed how other congregation members seemed uncomfortable with what had happened but did nothing. He observed Agatha continuing to assert her social dominance. Most importantly, he watched Sarah, strong, independent Sarah, trying to maintain her dignity while comforting their daughters. The woman who had raised 3 beautiful girls without him. The woman who had every right to hate him but had never spoken ill of him to the children. Pastor Wilson approached the small podium set up in the corner of the hall. He tapped the microphone twice. "May I have everyone's attention, please?" he called. The room gradually quieted. Agatha stepped forward, assuming she would be asked to speak again, but Pastor Wilson gestured for her to stay where she was. "Before we conclude today's event, we have someone who would like to address the congregation." He looked toward the back of the room. "Mr. Grant?" A murmur of confusion spread through the hall. Few recognized the name immediately. Thomas straightened his suit jacket and walked toward the podium, passing directly by Sarah and the triplets. For a brief moment, his eyes met Sarah's. Her expression changed from confusion to shock as she recognized him. "Oh my God," she whispered, too quietly for the girls to hear. Thomas reached the podium and faced the congregation. His eyes swept over the crowd, the wealthy members, the middle-class families, and finally resting on Sarah and his daughters in the corner. "Good afternoon," he began in a clear, confident voice. "My name is Thomas Grant." Recognition dawned on more faces now. Thomas Grant, the tech billionaire. Thomas Grant, whose company created security software used worldwide. Thomas Grant, who had been featured in business magazines. "I came here today planning to be an anonymous donor," he continued, "but after what I witnessed during the fundraising, I can no longer remain silent." Agatha stepped forward with a bright smile, suddenly recognizing a potential major donor. "Mr. Grant, we're so honored to have you." Thomas held up his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Please, Mrs. Williams." "I haven't finished." The hall fell completely silent. Every eye was fixed on Thomas. Sarah sat frozen, her hand gripping the table edge. "I'd like to say something about generosity," Thomas said, his voice strong and clear. "True generosity isn't measured by the amount given, but by the sacrifice it represents." He turned toward the corner where the triplets sat watching him with curious eyes. They didn't yet realize who he was. They saw only a stranger defending them. Those 3 beautiful girls who brought their savings today, they gave everything they had. Their donation of $24.75 represents months of saving and genuine sacrifice. Thomas looked directly at Agatha, and that small jar contains more generosity than some people with millions could ever understand. The room remained silent as Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and removed a folded document. His eyes found Sarah's again, and in them was a lifetime of regret and a plea for understanding. "There's something else everyone should know," he said, his voice softening slightly. "Those 3 wonderful girls are my daughters." Gasps echoed throughout the church hall as Thomas's words hung in the air. Sarah's face went pale and her hands trembled slightly. The triplets looked at their mother in confusion. "Mom?" Zoe whispered. "What is he talking about?" Agatha Williams stood frozen, her perfectly made-up face now showing genuine shock. Eleanor, her assistant, covered her mouth with her hand. Thomas continued speaking, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I'm the anonymous donor who promised to match today's contributions. Every dollar raised today, I will match." More murmurs swept through the crowd. Pastor Wilson nodded encouragingly from the side. "But after witnessing what happened today," Thomas said, looking directly at Agatha, "I'm adding more. I'm pledging an additional $1 million specifically in my daughters' names." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Agatha stepped forward, her face now transformed into a desperate smile. "Mr. Grant," she said, extending her hand. "What a wonderful surprise. Had I known your connection to the Johnson family—" Thomas ignored her outstretched hand. "Mrs. Williams, please step away from the podium." Pastor Wilson moved forward quickly. "Thank you, Agatha. I'll take it from here." Agatha retreated, her face flushing with embarrassment and anger. Several church members gave her disapproving looks as she backed away. Across the room, Sarah finally found her voice. "Girls, stay here with Mrs. Thompson for a moment." She stood up on shaky legs and walked toward Thomas. The triplets watched wide-eyed as their mother approached the stranger who claimed to be their father. "That man is our dad?" Zoe asked, her voice unusually small. Mrs. Thompson put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It seems so, dear." "But he's never been at our house," Zara said, watching carefully. "We only get cards from him on our birthdays." Thomas stepped away from the podium as Sarah approached. They stood facing each other a few feet apart as the entire congregation watched in silence. "Sarah," Thomas said quietly, "I know this is sudden. Can we talk privately?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. 5 years, Thomas. 5 years without seeing them." Pastor Wilson moved to their side. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in my office?" "For the children's sake." Sarah nodded stiffly. She turned and walked back to the triplets. "Girls," she said, keeping her voice calm despite her inner turmoil, "we need to go talk with Pastor Wilson and Mr. Grant for a few minutes." "Is he really our dad?" Zoe asked, tears forming in her eyes again. Sarah knelt down to their level. "Yes, he is, and we're going to talk about that now." The triplets stood up, holding hands with each other as they often did when nervous. Sarah led them toward Pastor Wilson's office, with Thomas following a few steps behind. As they walked out, the church hall erupted in conversation. Eleanor stepped to the podium. "Please enjoy the refreshments," she said. "Pastor Wilson will return shortly." Agatha made her way to Eleanor's side. "This is a disaster," she hissed. "I had no idea that was Thomas Grant." "Do you know how much he's worth? Billions." Eleanor looked at her coldly. "The problem isn't that you were rude to a billionaire's children, Agatha. It's that you were cruel to children. Period." In Pastor Wilson's office, the atmosphere was tense. The triplets sat together on a small sofa while Sarah sat in a chair next to them. Thomas remained standing, as did Pastor Wilson. "Girls," Pastor Wilson said gently, "this must be very surprising for you." Zoe looked at Thomas with wide eyes. Zoe crossed her arms defensively. Zara studied him carefully. "Why haven't you visited us?" Zoe asked directly. "If you're our dad." Thomas took a deep breath. "That's a fair question. Your mother and I separated when you were very little. I've been living in California, running my company." "You send us birthday cards," Zara said, "with gift cards inside." Thomas nodded. "Yes, I do. But I should have done much more than that. I should have been here." "Do you even know our names?" Zoe challenged. "Yes," Thomas said softly. "Zoe, Zoe, and Zara. I know which one is which, too." He looked at each girl as he said her name, getting it right. "I've kept up with your lives from a distance. I know Zoe loves art and won the school drawing contest last year. I know Zoe is the soccer star who scored 15 goals last season, and Zara, you won the science fair with your project on renewable energy." The girls exchanged surprised glances. "How do you know all that?" Zara asked suspiciously. Thomas looked at Sarah. "I've had someone send me pictures and news about you. I've watched you grow up from far away." "That's creepy," Zoe declared. "Zoe," Sarah said warningly. "No, she's right," Thomas admitted. "It wasn't the right way to be your father. I should have been here in person." Pastor Wilson cleared his throat. "Perhaps you'd like some privacy for this conversation. I can step out." "Actually," Sarah said, "I think we should take this somewhere else. The girls have had enough public attention for one day." Thomas nodded immediately. "Of course. Would you be comfortable coming to my hotel for lunch? The restaurant there is quiet and private." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, we'll meet you there." Outside in the church hall, the congregation was still buzzing with excitement. Eleanor was answering questions, while Agatha stood to the side, talking intensely with several wealthy church members. "I had no idea that woman was raising Grant's children," Agatha was saying. "She never mentioned it to anyone." "Shh, perhaps because it wasn't anyone's business," Mrs. Thompson said, approaching the group. "And her name is Sarah Johnson, not that woman." Agatha turned to Mrs. Thompson with a tight smile. "Gladys, surely you understand the situation is different now. If we'd known who those children were, then what?" Mrs. Thompson interrupted. "You would have treated them with respect because their father is wealthy? That's exactly the problem, Agatha. All children deserve respect, regardless of who their parents are or how much money they have." Several church members nodded in agreement. Eleanor stepped to the center of the room. "Pastor Wilson has asked me to make an announcement. The fundraiser will continue as planned, with Mr. Grant matching all of today's donations. We've now raised enough for the roof repairs, and we'll discuss plans for the additional funds at next week's service." Pastor Wilson's office door opened and Sarah emerged with the triplets. Thomas followed behind them. The room fell silent as they walked through. Agatha rushed forward. "Mr. Grant, I want to personally apologize for any misunderstanding earlier. Had I known your connection—" "Mrs. Williams," Thomas said firmly, "there was no misunderstanding. You were deliberately cruel to children who gave everything they had." He turned away from her and addressed Eleanor. "Please tell the board I'll be in touch about the donation details. The matching funds will be transferred tomorrow." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Grant." Thomas turned to Sarah and the girls. "I'll meet you at the Harborview Hotel in 30 minutes?" Sarah nodded. "We'll be there." As they walked toward the church exit, Zoe suddenly turned back and looked at Thomas. "Are you going to stay in Boston now? Or go back to California?" The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his answer. Thomas looked at the little girl, his daughter, with her hopeful eyes. "I'm staying in Boston, Zoe. For as long as you'll all have me in your lives." Zoe gave him a small, tentative smile before taking her mother's hand again. As the Johnson family left the church, Thomas turned to Pastor Wilson. "Thank you for your help today. This wasn't how I planned things, but maybe it's better this way." Pastor Wilson nodded. "Sometimes the most important moments in our lives aren't planned at all." Thomas glanced at Agatha, who was now talking urgently with several board members. "I suspect your church leadership will be changing soon." "Perhaps," Pastor Wilson agreed, "but today your family is what matters most. Go to them, Mr. Grant." Thomas nodded and walked toward the door, aware of all eyes following him. For a man who had built a billion-dollar company, faced down corporate rivals, and navigated the treacherous waters of Silicon Valley, he had never felt more nervous than he did about having lunch with 3 9-year-old girls. Outside the church, Sarah helped the triplets into her aging sedan. Each girl seemed lost in thought, processing the morning's events in her own way. "Mom," Zara asked as they pulled away from the curb, "why didn't you tell us our dad was famous?" Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Being famous or rich doesn't make someone a good father, Zara. Being present does." "Is that why you didn't want him around?" Zoe asked. "Because he wasn't good?" Sarah sighed. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Your father and I will explain everything. But I want you to know that he's always provided for you financially. The child support he sends pays for our apartment, your school supplies, everything we need." "But money isn't the same as being here," Zoe said quietly. Sarah glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror. "No, it isn't. That's something your father is just starting to understand." Sarah parked their car in the Harborview Hotel garage. The fancy hotel stood tall against the Boston skyline with glass windows that sparkled in the sunlight. The triplets looked up at the building with wide eyes. "Is this where rich people live?" Zoe asked. "Some people stay here when they visit Boston," Sarah explained as she helped them out of the car. "Your father is staying here temporarily." The girls held hands as they walked through the elegant lobby. Men and women in expensive clothes sat in plush chairs. A large fountain bubbled in the center of the room. Thomas was waiting for them near the restaurant entrance. He had changed into a fresh shirt but still looked nervous. "Thank you for coming," he said to Sarah. Then he looked at the triplets and smiled. "I reserved a private dining room so we can talk without people listening." A hotel worker led them to a small room with just one table and 5 chairs. Large windows showed the Boston harbor with boats moving across the water. The table was already set with water glasses and bread. Once they were seated, an uncomfortable silence fell. The triplets stared at Thomas while he stared back at them. "This is weird," Zoe finally said. Thomas laughed softly. "You're right. This is weird for all of us." A waiter came and took their orders. Thomas told the girls they could choose anything they wanted from the menu. Zoe and Zara ordered pasta. Zoe wanted a hamburger. Sarah and Thomas both chose salads. When the waiter left, Zara spoke up. "Why haven't you visited us before today?" Thomas set his water glass down carefully. "That's a fair question. The truth is complicated, but I'll try to explain it in a way that makes sense." He looked at Sarah, who nodded slightly. "When you girls were born, I was just starting my company," Thomas began. "I was working almost all day and night. Your mom was taking care of 3 babies, which is incredibly hard work." "We know," Zoe said. "Mom says we were loud." Sarah smiled. "Very loud." Thomas continued, "I wasn't a good partner to your mom. I was always working, always thinking about my company. We decided to separate because we weren't happy together anymore." "But why didn't you visit us?" Zoe asked, her voice small. Thomas looked down at his hands. "At first we agreed I would support you financially while your mom raised you. Then my company suddenly became very successful. I was traveling all the time and getting more and more busy." "That doesn't answer the question," Zara pointed out. "You could have visited between trips." Thomas nodded. "You're right. The real truth is that I was scared." "Scared of what?" Zoe asked. "We're just kids." "I was scared of being a bad father," Thomas admitted. "I grew up without a dad around. My mother worked 3 jobs to support me. I didn't know how to be a good dad, and I thought maybe it was better to stay away than to do it badly." Sarah spoke up. "I need to explain my part too." She looked at the girls. "When your father and I separated, I was very proud and stubborn. I wanted to prove I could take care of you by myself. But you always said Dad helped with money, Zara said. He did, Sarah confirmed. He has always sent child support through his lawyers. But when his company became successful and he had a lot more money, I wouldn't accept extra help. Why not? Zoe asked. We could have had new clothes instead of second-hand ones. Sarah reached for her daughter's hand. Because I was protecting my pride instead of thinking about what might be best for you girls. I'm sorry for that. Thomas leaned forward. We both made mistakes. But none of those mistakes were your fault, and none of them mean I don't love you. If you love us, why don't you know us? Zoe challenged. Thomas pulled out his phone. I do know you. Not as well as I should, but I've tried to keep up. He showed them the screen. I have photos of every school event, every sports game, every art show. The girls leaned forward to look. There were hundreds of pictures of them growing up. How did you get these? Zara asked suspiciously. I hired someone to attend your public events and take photos. I also asked your school for copies of newsletters and programs. That's creepy, Zoe said again. Maybe, Thomas acknowledged, but it was the only way I could watch you grow up when I wasn't brave enough to be there in person. The food arrived, creating a brief pause in the conversation. The girls began to eat, while Sarah and Thomas mostly moved food around on their plates. Do you have other kids? Zoe asked suddenly. Thomas shook his head. No, you three are my only children. Do you have a wife? Zoe asked. No, Thomas said. I've been focused on my work. That's sad, Zoe said simply. Thomas smiled sadly. Yes, it is. I've missed a lot by not being here with you. While they ate, back at St. Matthew's Church, the board of directors was having an emergency meeting. Pastor Wilson sat at the head of the table while 6 board members talked all at once. This is a disaster, Mr. Franklin said. Agatha humiliated Thomas Grant's children. She's driven away countless families over the years with her behavior, Mrs. Cooper added. Agatha sat stiffly at the end of the table. I had no way of knowing those children were related to a major donor. That's exactly the problem, Eleanor said from her seat near the door. You only care about people's worth if they have money. Pastor Wilson raised his hand for quiet. This situation has revealed a problem in our church community. We claim to value all gifts equally, but our actions today showed otherwise. I move that Agatha step down from the fundraising committee, Mrs. Cooper said. I second that motion, Mr. Franklin agreed. Agatha stood up angrily. I have led this committee for 10 years. I have raised more money than anyone else in church history. By shaming those who couldn't give large amounts, Eleanor said quietly. Today wasn't the first time. Pastor Wilson nodded. We'll take a vote. But first, I want to share something important. Mr. Grant called me from the hotel. His donation will still come through regardless of our decision today. But he asked me to make sure our church values align with the program he wants to establish, a children's program teaching about meaningful giving. Back at the Harborview Hotel, the triplets were eating dessert, large bowls of ice cream with chocolate sauce. Thomas watched them with a mixture of joy and sadness on his face. I have a question, Zara said, setting down her spoon. Are you only interested in us now because of what happened at church? Would you have contacted us if that lady hadn't been mean to us? The direct question made Thomas pause. Sarah watched him carefully. I came to church today specifically to see you, Thomas said finally. I arranged the donation with Pastor Wilson last week. I was planning to introduce myself to you after the service, but in a more private way. So, you were going to talk to us anyway? Zoe asked hopefully. Thomas nodded. Yes. I've been thinking about it for months. I moved back to Boston 3 weeks ago and rented an apartment here. I was working up my courage. What happens now? Sarah asked, speaking directly to Thomas for the first time since they'd ordered food. Thomas looked at each of the triplets, then at Sarah. "That depends on what all of you want. I would like to be part of your lives, not just financially, but really present. I want to attend your school events in person, not through pictures. I want to help with homework and take you to the park and learn who you really are." "Will you take us to Disney World?" Zoe asked. Sarah gave her a warning look. "Zoe, that's not appropriate." Thomas smiled. "I don't want to buy your love with trips and gifts. I want to earn it by being there for you, for soccer games and science fairs and everyday moments." "How do we know you won't leave again?" Zara asked. "That's a very good question," Thomas said. "I can only prove it to you over time by showing up consistently. I've moved my company's East Coast headquarters to Boston permanently, so I'll be living here from now on." Sarah looked surprised. "You moved your company here? When did you decide that?" 3 months ago, Thomas said, "when I saw pictures of the triplets' school play. They looked so grown up, and I realized I was missing everything." The girls finished their dessert as Thomas and Sarah talked about practical next steps. They agreed to start with weekend visits. Thomas would see the girls on Saturdays for a few hours. "Do we have to call you Dad?" Zoe asked as they prepared to leave. "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable," Thomas said. "You can use my first name until you're ready for anything else." Sarah gathered her purse. "We should go. It's been an emotional day for everyone." Thomas nodded and stood. "Thank you for coming. This means more to me than you know." As they walked to the hotel lobby, Thomas handed Sarah an envelope. "This is my contact information. Phone number, email, home address. Please call if you need anything at all." Sarah took the envelope carefully. "We've managed fine for 9 years, Thomas." "I know you have," Thomas said quietly. "You've done an amazing job with our daughters. I just want to help from now on, if you'll let me." The triplets stood watching this exchange. Zoe suddenly stepped forward and gave Thomas a quick, unexpected hug around his waist. Thomas froze in surprise, then gently placed his hand on her head. "Bye," Zoe said, stepping back to her sisters. "Goodbye, girls," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll see you next Saturday." As Sarah and the triplets walked toward the hotel exit, Thomas watched them go, his heart fuller than it had been in years. Thomas remained in the hotel lobby long after Sarah and the girls had disappeared through the revolving doors. He felt both lighter and heavier, relieved to have finally spoken with his daughters, yet weighed down by the years he had missed. The week that followed was the longest of Thomas's life. He threw himself into preparations, determined to make his first official visit with the triplets perfect. He researched child development books, redecorated his apartment's spare bedroom with 3 beds, and shopped for gifts that would show his daughters he truly knew them. When Saturday finally arrived, Thomas got to Wildflower Park 20 minutes early. Sarah had suggested the public park in their neighborhood as a neutral meeting place. He sat nervously on a bench, watching families play and wondering if he would ever feel like he belonged among them. At exactly 11 o'clock, he spotted Sarah walking toward him with the triplets. The girls wore jeans and colorful sweaters instead of their church dresses. Zoe waved when she saw him. Zara nodded politely. Zoe just stared. "Hello," Thomas said, standing up as they approached. "Thank you for coming." "Hi, Thomas," Zoe said, using his first name as they had agreed. Sarah smiled tiredly. "They've been up since 6 this morning, asking every 5 minutes when we would leave." Thomas had 3 gift bags in his hands, 1 purple, 1 green, and 1 blue. "I brought something for each of you," he said, handing them out. "Purple for Zoe, green for Zoe, and blue for Zara." The girls took the bags curiously. "You can open them," Thomas said. Zoe pulled out a professional-quality sketchbook and a set of artist pencils. Her eyes widened. "These are the ones I saw in the art store window." Thomas nodded. "I noticed you looking at them when you walked by Jackson's Art Supply last month. The store owner remembered you." Zoe opened her green bag and found new soccer cleats in her size. "How did you know I needed new ones?" I saw your current ones are getting too small in the photos from your last game, Thomas explained. Zara carefully removed a science kit from her blue bag. The Microscope Explorer set, she read aloud, with real glass slides. Your science teacher mentioned you were interested in microbiology, Thomas said. Sarah watched this exchange with surprise. You really have been paying attention. Thomas nodded. I wanted them to know this isn't sudden interest. I've cared all along, even if I wasn't here. Sarah checked her watch. I have some errands to run. Will you be okay with the girls for 3 hours? I'll meet you back here. We'll be fine, Thomas assured her. I thought we might visit the Children's Museum if the girls are interested. The Children's Museum, Zoe exclaimed. I love that place. Sarah nodded. That sounds nice. Girls, remember to stay together and listen to Thomas. I'll be back at 2 o'clock. After Sarah left, Thomas looked at his daughters. So, would you like to go to the museum? Or we could do something else if you prefer. The museum, all three said together. They walked to Thomas's car, a modest blue sedan rather than the luxury vehicle the girls might have expected. Is this really your car? Zoe asked skeptically. I thought rich people had fancy cars. Thomas smiled as he opened the doors. I prefer simple things most of the time. My company makes money, but that doesn't mean I need to spend it all on fancy stuff. At the Children's Museum, the triplets gradually relaxed. Zoe loved the art room, where she could create with different materials. Zoe enjoyed the physical activities in the sports zone. Zara spent most of her time in the science exhibits, examining everything carefully. Thomas followed them, answering questions and asking his own. He learned that Zoe wanted to be an artist when she grew up. Zoe hoped to play professional soccer. Zara was considering becoming a doctor or scientist. During lunch at the museum cafe, Zara pulled out a small notebook. I have questions for you, she said seriously. Thomas put down his sandwich. I'm ready. Question 1. Why were you scared to be our dad? Thomas took a deep breath. When I was growing up, my father left when I was 2 years old. My mother worked very hard to take care of me, but she was always tired and stressed. I never learned how to be a good father because I didn't have one. That's sad, Zoe said. Yes, Thomas agreed. When you 3 were born, I was scared I would fail you. My company was just starting, and I was working all the time. Instead of trying my best, I ran away from the responsibility. That was wrong of me. Zara wrote something in her notebook. Question 2. Do you have other children we don't know about? No, Thomas said firmly. You 3 are my only children. Question 3. Are you only interested in us because of what happened at church? Thomas shook his head. No, I moved back to Boston 3 weeks ago specifically to reconnect with you. What happened at church just made me act more quickly. Meanwhile, at St. Matthew's Church, Pastor Wilson sat in his office with Eleanor and 2 board members. The church roof repair had begun, with workers removing old shingles. The fundraising committee voted 7-2 to remove Agatha from leadership, Mrs. Cooper reported. She's threatening to withdraw her family's financial support, Mr. Franklin added. And she's convinced several other wealthy families to do the same. Pastor Wilson sighed. Our principles aren't for sale. If people only give to maintain control, that's not true giving. Mr. Grant's donation will cover the roof and more, Eleanor said. He called this morning to confirm the money has been transferred. It's not just about the money, Pastor Wilson said. It's about what kind of community we want to be. Eleanor, are you comfortable leading the fundraising committee temporarily? Eleanor nodded. I have some ideas for a more inclusive approach. We could celebrate all contributions, regardless of size. Back at the Children's Museum, the triplets were exploring the water exhibit, building dams and creating currents. Thomas watched them work together, noticing how they communicated without words, as only identical siblings could. "They're amazing," he said when Zoe came over for a quick drink of water. Zoe shrugged. "Mom says we're a handful." Thomas smiled. "I'm sure you are, but you're also incredible people." "Are you going to stay in Boston forever now?" Zoe asked directly. "That's my plan," Thomas confirmed. "I've moved my company's East Coast office here permanently. What if you change your mind?" Thomas looked directly at his daughter. "I won't change my mind about you three. Ever. I've already missed 9 years. I don't want to miss another day." Zoe studied his face, then nodded once before rejoining her sisters. When it was time to meet Sarah, the triplets were tired but happy. They walked back to the park, where Sarah was waiting on the same bench. "Did you have a good time?" she asked the girls. "Thomas bought us ice cream even though it wasn't after dinner," Zoe reported. Thomas looked guilty. "Was that against the rules?" "I should have asked." Sarah laughed. "It's fine. Saturday treats are allowed." "Mom, can Thomas take us to the Science Center next weekend?" Zara asked. "They have a new exhibit about space." Sarah glanced at Thomas. "If he's free, that would be okay." "I'm free," Thomas said quickly. "I'll clear my whole schedule." As they said goodbye, Zoe gave Thomas another quick hug. This time, Zara joined her. Only Zoe held back, giving him a small wave instead. "Thank you for today," Thomas said to Sarah. "It means a lot." "They had a good time," Sarah acknowledged. "But Thomas, please remember this is just the beginning. Being a parent isn't about fun days at museums. It's about being there consistently, even when it's hard." Thomas nodded. "I know. I'm ready for the hard parts too." As Sarah walked away with the girls, Thomas's phone rang. It was Pastor Wilson. "Mr. Grant, I wanted to update you on the church situation. Agatha has resigned from the fundraising committee, though not willingly. Several major donors are threatening to withhold support. Will that affect the roof repairs?" Thomas asked. "No, your donation covers that completely, but there's tension in the congregation." "My donation stands regardless of church politics," Thomas assured him, "and I'd still like to fund that children's program we discussed." "Thank you," Pastor Wilson said. "By the way, how did your visit with your daughters go today?" Thomas watched Sarah and the triplets walking down the street, the girls talking animatedly with their mother. "It was a good start," he said, "but I have a long way to go." That night, Thomas sat in his apartment looking at the new photos on his phone, pictures of Zoe drawing, Zoe building a water dam, Zara examining a science exhibit. For the first time, these weren't photos taken by someone he'd hired. They were moments he had witnessed himself. He opened his laptop and canceled his return ticket to California. Boston was home now because his daughters were here. Everything else, his company headquarters, his penthouse apartment, his executive team, would have to adjust to this new reality. 1 month after Thomas's first official visit with the triplets, cardboard boxes filled his new apartment. The building sat just 3 blocks from Sarah's home in a regular neighborhood, not the luxury high-rise where he had initially stayed. A moving crew carried in his furniture while Thomas directed them where to place each piece. "The purple bed goes in that corner," he told the movers as they brought in 3 identical beds with different colored bedding. "The green one near the window and the blue one against the wall." His phone rang. It was Sarah. "The girls are wondering if you're still coming to Zoe's soccer game today," she said. "It starts at 3 o'clock. "I'll be there," Thomas promised. "Just finishing setting up their room." "Their room?" Sarah asked. "Yes, for when they visit. Each has her own bed in her favorite color." There was a pause before Sarah responded. "Thomas, we agreed to Saturday visits, not overnight stays." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not rushing anything. I just want them to have their own space here when they're ready." At 3 o'clock, Thomas stood awkwardly at the edge of the soccer field. Parents sat in folding chairs, cheering as their children ran across the grass. He spotted Sarah sitting with some other mothers and walked over. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, pointing to an empty chair beside her. Sarah nodded. "You can sit here." A woman on Sarah's other side leaned forward. "You must be Thomas." "I'm Jennifer, Danny's mom. Our kids have been in the same class for 5 years." "Nice to meet you," Thomas said. Jennifer's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Sarah has raised those girls alone for 9 years. We've all watched her struggle and succeed without any help." "Jennifer," Sarah said quietly. "Not now." "I'm just saying," Jennifer continued, "suddenly showing up with money doesn't make someone a father." Thomas nodded. "You're absolutely right. I have a lot to prove." On the field, Zoe spotted Thomas and gave a small wave before returning to the game. She played aggressively, stealing the ball from opponents and racing down the field. "She's really good," Thomas said. "She practices every day," Sarah replied. "Even in winter she's outside with that ball." After the game, Zoe's team won by 2 goals. Thomas congratulated her. "Great job out there. You're really talented." Zoe shrugged. "Mom never misses a game, even when she's super tired from work." The comment stung, but Thomas nodded. "I'm glad she's been there for you. I hope to be at all your games from now on, too." The next day, Thomas sat in a comfortable office across from Dr. Lisa Chen, a therapist recommended by an old college friend. "I've missed 9 years of my daughter's lives," Thomas explained. "I want to be a good father, but I don't know how." Dr. Chen nodded. "What was your relationship with your own father like?" "Non-existent. He left when I was 2. My mother worked 3 jobs to support us." "And how did that affect you growing up?" Thomas stared out the window. "I learned to take care of myself. I learned that depending on people was risky because they leave. So when you became a father yourself..." "I panicked," Thomas admitted. "I buried myself in work because it was something I could control. I told myself sending money was enough." Later that week, Thomas attended Zoe's art club showcase at the community center. Her paintings hung on the wall alongside other children's artwork. Zoe beamed when she saw Thomas arrive. "You came," she said. "Of course," Thomas replied. "I wouldn't miss it." Sarah stood nearby, watching their interaction. When Thomas approached her, she handed him a sheet of paper. "Here's the girls' schedule for the next month. School events, doctor appointments, activities. You should know these things if you're going to be involved." Thomas took the paper gratefully. "Thank you. I want to help with all of it." "Just being present is help," Sarah said. "They need consistency more than anything else." On Friday afternoon, Thomas sat in the school auditorium watching Zara present her science project. She stood confidently in front of her display about ecosystem balance. "The butterfly effect shows how small changes can impact entire systems," she explained to the judges. After the presentations, the school principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, approached Thomas. "Mr. Grant, I understand you're Zara's father?" "Yes," Thomas said, extending his hand. "I'm sorry we haven't met before now." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. "Sarah has been the girl's only parent contact for years. She's done a remarkable job." "She has," Thomas agreed. "Our school's STEM program needs new equipment," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "The budget was cut this year." "I'd be happy to help," Thomas said immediately, "but I'd prefer to donate anonymously." This isn't about recognition. At St. Matthew's Church, the sound of hammering filled the air as workers replaced the old roof. Pastor Wilson walked through the sanctuary with Eleanor, discussing the renovation progress. "The workers found more damage than expected," Eleanor reported, "but Mr. Grant's donation covers everything." "How is the new fundraising committee working out?" Pastor Wilson asked. Eleanor smiled. "We've implemented the Every Gift Matters approach. We celebrate all donations equally, regardless of size." "And the response?" "Mixed," Eleanor admitted. "Some members love the inclusivity, others miss Agatha's directness." Outside in the church garden, Agatha Williams sat with 4 other wealthy members, all dressed in expensive clothes. "This new approach is ridiculous," Agatha said. The church has bills to pay. We can't pretend that $20 means as much as $20,000. Mrs. Blackwell, another longtime donor, nodded. The standards have fallen. I suggest we withhold our quarterly donations until the board reconsiders your position. Exactly, Agatha agreed. They'll change their tune when the bills come due. That Saturday, Thomas had all 3 girls at his apartment for the first time. They explored their new room with curiosity. You got us each a bed? Zara asked, touching the blue bedspread. And desks, Thomas added, showing them the small workspace in the corner. Zoe, there's an easel for your art. Zoe, there's space for your sports equipment. Zara, I got you a bookshelf for your science books. This is nice, Zoe said, sitting on her purple bed. Zoe frowned. But we're not sleeping here, right? We go home to Mom's. That's right, Thomas assured her. This is just for when you visit. Your home is still with your mom. In the kitchen, Thomas attempted to make lunch. The girls watched as he struggled with the pasta. Mom says the water has to boil before you put the pasta in, Zara offered. And you have to stir it, Zoe added. Thomas laughed. I have a lot to learn about cooking. I usually order food. We can help, Zoe volunteered. Mom taught us basic stuff. Later, while the girls watched a movie, Thomas called Sarah. Everything okay? She asked immediately. Everything's fine. The girls are teaching me how to cook. I just wanted to ask. The school mentioned needing STEM equipment. I'd like to donate, but anonymously. Why anonymously? Sarah questioned. Because I don't want the girls or their classmates thinking any special treatment comes from my money. I want to earn their respect through consistency, not purchases. There was silence, then Sarah spoke softly. That's actually really thoughtful, Thomas. That evening, when Thomas brought the triplets home, they talked excitedly about their day. Thomas has a video game system, Zoe reported. And he let me hang my drawing on the refrigerator, Zoe added. His building has a pool, Zara informed her mother. Maybe we can swim there in summer. After the girls went inside, Sarah turned to Thomas. They had fun. That's good. I want to ask you something, Thomas said carefully. Would you consider letting me pick them up from school 1 day a week, just to help with your schedule? Sarah hesitated. That's a big step. I know, but I want to be involved in the regular days, not just the fun weekends. Let me think about it, Sarah said. The following Wednesday, Thomas sat in another therapy session. I'm trying to balance everything, he told Dr. Chen, being available for my daughters while running my company. My board isn't happy about the Boston relocation. What would your younger self think about these choices? Dr. Chen asked. Thomas thought for a moment. He wouldn't understand. Money and success were everything to him. And now? Now I realize success means nothing if I miss my daughters growing up. On Thursday morning, Thomas received an urgent call from his company. A major client was threatening to cancel their contract unless Thomas personally attended a meeting in California. This is a $20 million account, his vice president explained. We can't lose it. Thomas checked his schedule. The meeting would conflict with the triplets' school play, their first performance where he was listed as their father on the program. I'll call you back, Thomas told his vice president. He stared at the calendar on his desk, facing the first major test of his new priorities. Thomas picked up his phone and called his vice president back. I can't make the California meeting, he said firmly. My daughter's school play is that evening. Thomas, be reasonable, his vice president replied. This is $20 million we're talking about. Surely a children's play can wait. No, it can't, Thomas said. Find another solution. Have Robert handle the meeting. He knows the client well. The client specifically asked for you. Then reschedule. I'm not missing this play. After hanging up, Thomas felt both relief and anxiety. He had made his choice, but there would be consequences. His phone immediately began buzzing with messages from board members expressing their concern. On Thursday evening, Thomas arrived at Westfield Elementary School 30 minutes early. The auditorium was already filling with parents saving seats and children in costumes running around backstage. Thomas looked for Sarah, hoping she had saved him a seat. He spotted her in the 5th row, sitting between Jennifer, Zoe's teammate's mother, and another woman he didn't recognize. There was no empty seat beside her. Thomas approached awkwardly. "Hi, Sarah. Is there a seat nearby?" Sarah looked surprised. "You came? I thought you'd have to work." "I told you I would be here," Thomas said quietly. Jennifer gave him a skeptical look. "We didn't save seats." "It's first come, first served." Thomas nodded. "No problem. I'll find somewhere to sit." He ended up standing at the back wall of the auditorium. As the lights dimmed, he took out his phone to silence it and saw 15 missed calls from his office. He turned it off completely. The play was about historical Boston figures. All 3 triplets had roles. Zoe played an artist painting the Boston harbor, Zoe was a revolutionary soldier, and Zara portrayed a scientist making discoveries. When they came on stage together for their scene, Thomas raised his phone to record the moment. After the performance, the children joined their families in the auditorium. Thomas waited nervously, watching as other parents hugged their kids and gave them flowers. The triplets emerged from backstage, still in costume. Zoe spotted Thomas first, and her face lit up. "You came," she said, running over to hug him. "Of course I did," Thomas replied. "You were amazing." Zara approached next, looking pleased but reserved. "Did you see my science experiment part?" "I did. Your demonstration was perfect." Zoe hung back, standing beside Sarah. "I thought you'd be too busy," she said when Thomas approached. "Nothing was more important than this," Thomas told her. Sarah watched this exchange with mixed emotions. "The girls did well, didn't they?" "They were incredible," Thomas agreed. "I recorded their scene if you'd like a copy." "Thanks," Sarah said. "I didn't think to record it." As they walked toward the exit, Thomas's phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it. The next morning, Thomas sat in his Boston office facing a video screen with his entire board of directors. Their faces looked serious. "The Westwood contract is gone," the chairman said. "They signed with our competitor yesterday after Robert couldn't answer their technical questions. $20 million, Thomas." "I understand," Thomas said calmly. "It's a significant loss, but not catastrophic for a company our size." "This isn't just about one contract," another board member said. "It's about your priorities. You moved our East Coast headquarters to Boston at great expense. You're missing critical meetings. Shareholders are asking questions." "My family is here," Thomas stated simply. "My daughters need me present in their lives." "No one questions the importance of family," the chairman said, "but surely there's a middle ground that doesn't risk the company you built." After the difficult meeting, Thomas drove to St. Matthew's Church to check on the renovation progress. The parking lot was filled with construction vehicles. Inside, Pastor Wilson was talking with workers who looked concerned. "What's happening?" Thomas asked. Pastor Wilson turned with a worried expression. The workers discovered severe structural damage behind the west wall. "Water has been leaking into the frame for years. It will cost an additional $75,000 to repair properly." "That wasn't in the budget," Thomas said. "No, it wasn't. We're calling an emergency meeting tonight to discuss options." That evening, the church meeting room was packed with members. Agatha Williams sat with her supporters on one side, while Eleanor and the new fundraising committee sat on the other. Pastor Wilson called for order. "As many of you know, our contractors discovered serious structural damage today," he announced. "We need an additional $75,000 to complete repairs safely." Agatha stood immediately. "This is exactly why we need experienced leadership for fundraising. The new committee clearly failed to plan properly." Eleanor responded calmly. "The damage was hidden inside the walls. No one could have known about it beforehand." "Perhaps," Agatha said with a smile, "but a more aggressive fundraising approach would have collected enough extra to cover unexpected costs." Murmurs spread through the room as people took sides. Thomas stood up. I'll cover the additional costs." The room fell silent. "Thank you, Mr. Grant," Pastor Wilson said. "That's very generous. I have 2 conditions," Thomas continued. "First, complete transparency about church finances moving forward. Second, I'd like to see the establishment of that children's program we discussed, teaching young people about meaningful giving." Agatha frowned. "Mr. Grant, while your generosity is appreciated, you seem to be using your wealth to control church priorities." "Not control," Thomas corrected. "Support. I believe in what Pastor Wilson is trying to build here, a community that values all contributions." After the meeting, Thomas drove home tired but satisfied. When he arrived at his apartment, he opened his laptop to check work emails. Among them was a message from his California assistant about local private schools with their admission deadlines. Thomas had forgotten he'd asked for this information months ago before moving to Boston. He was reading through it when his doorbell rang. It was Sarah, and she looked angry. "Can I come in?" she asked stiffly. "Of course." Thomas stepped aside. The triplets were in the car, watching from the window. Sarah held up her phone. "Why are you researching private schools in California?" Thomas looked confused until he realized what had happened. "You saw my emails? Zara wanted to show me pictures from the Science Center. She used your laptop last weekend, and it was still logged into your email. The screen showed school information in California." Thomas sighed. "I can explain. Are you planning to move back?" Sarah demanded. "Or worse, are you thinking about taking the girls there?" "No, that research was from before I moved here. I forgot all about it." Sarah crossed her arms. "Then why were you looking at it tonight?" "It came in an old email. I was just clearing my inbox." "I don't believe you," Sarah said, her voice rising. "You make all these promises about staying, about being present, but your company is in California. Your board is unhappy. It was just a matter of time before you chose your real life over this one." "This is my real life," Thomas insisted. "I chose the girls' play over a $20 million contract yesterday. One time, one choice." Sarah's voice was louder now. "Being a father isn't about grand gestures, Thomas. It's about being there every single day, year after year." In the car, the triplets watched their parents arguing through the apartment window. "They're fighting about us," Zara said quietly. "Mom looks really mad," Zoe whispered. "I told you he wouldn't stay," Zoe said. Inside, the argument continued. "You don't trust me," Thomas said, "after everything I've done these past months." "Because I know you," Sarah shot back. "When things get hard, you retreat to work. You always have." "I'm trying to change that. I'm in therapy. I moved here. I rearranged my entire life." "For how long? Until the novelty wears off? Until your company needs you more? The girls are finally getting attached to you, Thomas. Do you know what it will do to them when you leave again?" "I'm not leaving," Thomas insisted. Sarah's voice quieted. "I found other emails too. Your board wants you back in California. They've scheduled a vote on whether to reverse the headquarters move." Thomas looked shocked. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is you didn't tell me. You're making all these promises to the girls while your company is pulling you back." Thomas sat down heavily. "I was going to handle it. I didn't want to worry you." "We're not yours to worry about," Sarah said coldly. "We managed 9 years without you. We'll manage if you leave again." "I don't want to leave," Thomas said quietly. "But I can't just abandon my company either." Sarah walked to the door. "Then you need to decide, once and for all, what matters most to you. Because half measures won't work anymore. The girls deserve better than a part-time father who disappears when things get complicated." After Sarah left, Thomas stood at his window watching her car drive away. His phone rang again, another emergency from the office. His computer pinged with more urgent emails. The two worlds he was trying to balance were colliding. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He pulled out a family photo he kept on his nightstand, a picture he had taken secretly at a school event years ago before he had re-entered his daughters' lives. The girls were so small then, with missing front teeth and ribbons in their hair. Now they were growing up. Now they knew who he was. Now they were starting to trust him. And he was at risk of breaking that fragile trust. Thomas stared at the ceiling, knowing Sarah was right. The time had come for him to make a final choice about what and who truly mattered most. Thomas rose at dawn after a sleepless night. He showered, dressed in his best suit, and made 3 important phone calls before 7 o'clock. By 8, he was driving to his Boston office with a clear plan in mind. "Call an emergency board meeting," he told his assistant as he walked through the door. "Everyone needs to attend either in person or by video, today at 10 o'clock. Some board members are traveling," his assistant warned. "I don't care if they're climbing Mount Everest," Thomas said firmly. "This can't wait." At 10 o'clock sharp, Thomas faced the 12 members of his board. 3 sat in the conference room with him while 9 appeared on video screens. All looked concerned. "Thank you for joining on short notice," Thomas began. "I've made an important decision that will affect the future of this company." The chairman leaned forward. "Thomas, if this is about the Westwood contract, we can discuss recovery strategies." "This isn't about Westwood," Thomas interrupted. "I'm permanently relocating our company headquarters to Boston." The room fell silent for 3 seconds before erupting in protests. "That's financially irresponsible. The California campus was built specifically for us. Our top talent won't relocate." Thomas raised his hand. "I understand your concerns. I've prepared a complete analysis." He distributed folders to those in the room and sent digital copies to the others. "Boston has a strong tech ecosystem. Housing costs are 20% lower than Silicon Valley. The talent pool from local universities is excellent." "This isn't about business," one board member accused. "It's about your personal situation." Thomas nodded. "You're right. My daughters are here in Boston and I need to be where they are. But that doesn't make this a bad business decision." "The shareholders won't accept this," the chairman warned. "I still own 51% of this company," Thomas reminded them. "The decision is made. We can either work together on a smooth transition, or I'll find board members who will." After 2 hours of heated discussion, the board reluctantly agreed to support the move, though several members threatened to resign. Thomas thanked them and ended the meeting, feeling both drained and relieved. His next stop was Sarah's workplace, a small web development company in a converted warehouse. The receptionist looked startled when Thomas Grant asked to see Sarah Johnson. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked nervously. "No, but it's important. Just 5 minutes of her time." Sarah looked surprised and wary when she came to the reception area. "Thomas? What are you doing here? Can we talk privately for a few minutes?" She led him to a small meeting room and closed the door. "If this is about last night." "It is," Thomas said. "You were right. I needed to make a clear choice." He placed a leather folder on the table. "I just finished an emergency board meeting. I've permanently moved the company headquarters to Boston. It's official and irreversible." Sarah sat down slowly. "What about the board vote you mentioned in those emails?" "I didn't wait for it. I exercised my majority ownership to make the decision final." Thomas pushed the folder toward her. "These are legal documents I've prepared. They formalize my commitment to the girls with structured visitation and increased financial support." Sarah opened the folder cautiously. "It still respects your authority as their primary parent," Thomas explained, "but it establishes my permanent role in their lives. No more uncertainty." "Why were you researching California schools?" Sarah asked, still not entirely convinced. "Honestly? I was building a file comparing them unfavorably to the girls' current education. I wanted proof their Boston school was better, in case anyone suggested moving them." Sarah studied his face. "You really are staying?" "Yes," Thomas said simply. "My life is here now. Everything else will have to adjust to that reality." Across town at St. Matthew's Church, tensions were high in the packed meeting room. The church's structural repairs had revealed even more problems, and costs were mounting despite Thomas's generous donations. Agatha Williams stood at the front of the room, addressing the congregation. This situation proves my point. The new leadership is failing. I move for a vote of no confidence in Pastor Wilson's direction for this church. Several of her wealthy supporters nodded in agreement. Eleanor looked worried as she sat with the new fundraising committee members. Pastor Wilson remained calm. "You're entitled to your opinion, Agatha. Let's put it to a congregation vote." "Before we vote," Agatha continued, "remember that several long-time donors have already withheld their regular contributions. This church cannot survive on small donations and one billionaire's charity." The door opened, and Thomas walked in quietly, taking a seat in the back row. A murmur swept through the room as people noticed his arrival. Agatha smiled, seeing an opportunity. "Ah, Mr. Grant, perfect timing. Perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on the church's financial management?" She clearly expected Thomas to side with traditional power structures. After all, wealthy people typically stuck together. Thomas stood and walked to the front. "Thank you for asking my opinion, Mrs. Williams. I do have thoughts to share." Agatha stepped aside, looking triumphant. "When I first came to St. Matthew's," Thomas began, "I saw a church divided by wealth and status. I watched 3 little girls be humiliated for giving all they had. That moment changed my life." Agatha's smile faded. "Since then," Thomas continued, "I've seen Pastor Wilson and Eleanor working to build a community where everyone feels valued, regardless of what they can give. That's the kind of church I want to support." Pastor Wilson nodded gratefully. "So yes, I have an opinion," Thomas concluded. "I fully support Pastor Wilson's vision, and I respectfully suggest that Mrs. Williams's approach is counter to the values this church should represent." Agatha's face turned red. "This is outrageous. I've served this church for decades." "And we appreciate that service," Pastor Wilson said gently, "but perhaps it's time for new voices and new approaches." The congregation voted. By a significant majority, they rejected Agatha's motion of no confidence and accepted her resignation from all leadership positions. Agatha walked out, followed by several of her closest supporters. "Thank you," Eleanor told Thomas afterward. "Your support means a lot." "The church is making good progress," Thomas said. "How are the children's programs coming along?" "We're ready to launch in 2 weeks," Eleanor said excitedly. "We already have 20 children signed up to learn about meaningful giving." That evening, Thomas prepared dinner in his apartment kitchen. He wasn't a skilled cook, but he followed a simple recipe for pasta and sauce, wanting to make the meal himself instead of ordering food. At 6 o'clock, Sarah arrived with the triplets. The girls looked around curiously. They had visited before, but the apartment felt different tonight. "Something smells good," Zoe said, sniffing the air. "I made dinner," Thomas said proudly. "It might not taste as good as it smells, but I tried my best." The table was set with 5 places and a small vase of flowers in the center. Thomas served the pasta while the girls giggled at his clumsy attempts to twirl it onto their plates. During dinner, Thomas told them about his day. "I made some big decisions today. My company is staying in Boston permanently now." "Does that mean you're staying too?" Zara asked carefully. "Yes," Thomas confirmed. "Boston is my home now because you 3 are here." After dinner, Thomas brought out a small box. Inside were 3 keys on colored keychains, purple, green, and blue. "These are for you," he said, handing one to each girl, "keys to this apartment, so you know you always have a place here." Zoe immediately attached hers to her backpack. Zara examined hers carefully before putting it in her pocket. Zoe held hers uncertainly. "Even if we don't sleep here yet?" Zoe asked. "Even then," Thomas assured her. "This is your space whenever you want it." Later, while Sarah and Thomas cleaned up the kitchen, the girls explored the apartment more thoroughly. "The girls seem happy," Thomas said quietly. "Especially Zoe. I think she's starting to trust me." Sarah nodded. "She asked me yesterday about your favorite foods. She wanted to know what to cook when you visit our place." Thomas smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "I spoke with my lawyer today about the support payments. I'd like to increase them." "We don't need more money," Sarah started to object. "It's not about need," Thomas explained. "It's about providing the best opportunities for the girls. College funds, summer programs, whatever they might want to explore." Sarah considered this. "Let's discuss it later. Tonight is about family, not finances." As they finished washing dishes, Thomas asked the question that had been on his mind all day. "Do you think someday they might want to stay overnight here? Not right away, but eventually?" Sarah dried her hands on a towel. "One step at a time, Thomas. You've made good progress, but building trust takes time." In the living room, Zoe approached Thomas with a question that surprised him. "What was your favorite thing to do when you were a kid?" she asked. Thomas thought for a moment. "I loved building things. I had these building blocks I would use to make towers and bridges." "They're like coding?" Zoe asked. "Mom says you build things with computer code." "Exactly like that," Thomas said, delighted by her insight. "Do you like building things too?" Zoe nodded. "I build soccer strategies. It's like solving puzzles." For the first time, Thomas saw something of himself in his most distant daughter. It was a small connection, but it felt monumental. As the evening ended and Sarah prepared to take the girls home, Thomas stood at the door watching his family leave. This time, all three girls hugged him goodbye, even Zoe. "See you on Saturday?" Zoe asked. "Definitely," Thomas promised. "And I'll be at Zara's science club on Thursday too." Sarah gave him a small smile as they left. "Good night, Thomas. You did good today." Thomas closed the door behind them, feeling more certain than ever that he had made the right decision. His company might face challenges from the relocation, and he would have difficult conversations with board members in the coming weeks. But none of that mattered compared to the 3 keys his daughters now carried, tangible symbols of his commitment to remain in their lives. 6 months passed quickly. Spring turned to summer in Boston, bringing warm days, baseball games, and ice cream in the park. For Thomas, each day brought new challenges and small victories as he built his life around his daughters. On a warm June morning, Thomas stood in his new corporate headquarters in downtown Boston. Large windows overlooked the harbor, and the company logo shone on the wall behind the reception desk. His assistant Maria handed him a folder. "The quarterly report is ready," she said. "The numbers aren't great." Thomas opened the folder and frowned. "Our stock price is down 15% since the move." 3 senior engineers refused to relocate from California, Maria reminded him, and the Miller project is 2 months behind schedule. Thomas sighed. "Schedule a meeting with the development team tomorrow. We need to fix this quickly." "Also," Maria added, "the board wants another emergency meeting next week. Mr. Peterson called twice this morning." Thomas nodded. "Set it up. I'll handle Peterson." Despite the business challenges, Thomas felt certain he had made the right choice. His schedule now revolved around the triplets. He had them 2 weekends each month and joined them for dinner every Wednesday. He attended their school events and activities, gradually building relationships with each girl in different ways. That afternoon, Thomas picked the girls up from their summer day camp. They ran to his car with colorful backpacks bouncing. "I made a painting of the ocean," Zoe announced, showing him a bright blue canvas. "Excellent. We can hang it in your room at my place," Thomas said. Zoe had embraced Thomas fully, eager to share her life and art with him. She called him almost daily to tell him about new drawings or ideas. Zara climbed into the back seat carefully. "The science instructor brought in real frogs today. We studied their life cycles." "That sounds fascinating," Thomas replied. "Did you take notes?" Zara nodded. She maintained her measured approach to Thomas, observing his behavior before fully trusting him. She kept a small notebook where she tracked his promises and whether he kept them. Recently, Thomas had noticed her writing "consistent" on several pages. Zoe tossed her soccer bag into the trunk. "Coach says I might make the advanced team next fall if I keep practicing." "That's amazing news," Thomas said. "Would you like to practice this weekend at the park?" Zoe shrugged. "Maybe." She remained the most guarded of the three, though Thomas had noticed small changes. She no longer tested him constantly, and sometimes she even smiled when he arrived. "How about ice cream before I take you home?" Thomas suggested. "Yes," all three girls said together. At the ice cream shop, Thomas watched his daughters enjoying their treats. Zoe had chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Zara chose vanilla with strawberries. Zoe always picked mint chocolate chip. "Your birthday is in 3 weeks," Thomas said. "Have you thought about what you might want to do?" The triplets exchanged looks. Their birthday was a big topic recently. "Mom says we can have a party at the community center," Zara said. "With a real DJ," Zoe added excitedly. "And a cake with 3 layers, one for each of us," Zoe finished. Thomas smiled. "That sounds wonderful. Is there anything special you'd like from me?" The girls looked at each other again, having one of their silent conversations that Thomas couldn't interpret. "We want to sleep over at your apartment," Zoe said finally, "for our birthday weekend." Thomas nearly dropped his ice cream cone. This was a huge step, one he had been hoping for but didn't expect so soon. "Have you talked to your mom about this?" he asked carefully. Zara nodded. "She said it was okay if you agreed." "Then yes, absolutely," Thomas said, trying to contain his excitement. "We'll make it special." Later that day, Thomas visited St. Matthew's Church. The renovations were nearly complete, the new roof gleamed in the sunshine, and workers were installing the final sections of stained glass windows. Inside, the structural repairs had strengthened the historic building while preserving its character. Pastor Wilson greeted Thomas warmly, "Just in time to see the finishing touches." "It looks wonderful," Thomas said, admiring the renovated space. "How's the new children's program going?" "Incredibly well," Pastor Wilson replied. "Eleanor has 35 children enrolled now. The triplets have been wonderful helpers with the younger kids." They walked to the new children's area, a bright room with colorful murals and small tables. Eleanor was there with several volunteers preparing materials. "Thomas! Good to see you," Eleanor called. "We're getting ready for tomorrow's lesson on community giving. The fundraising committee report shows we've actually raised more money with the new inclusive approach," Pastor Wilson noted. "Many small donations have added up to more than we used to get from a few large ones." Thomas noticed Agatha Williams sitting alone in a pew in the main sanctuary. Though no longer in leadership, she still attended services regularly. "How is Mrs. Williams adjusting?" Thomas asked quietly. Pastor Wilson sighed. "She's struggling. Change is difficult after decades of doing things her way, but she's still part of our community." Thomas nodded and walked over to Agatha. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Williams." She looked up, surprised. "Mr. Grant, I didn't expect to see you today." "I wanted to check on the renovations," Thomas explained. "The church looks beautiful." Agatha nodded stiffly. "Yes, the repairs were necessary. I've heard the new children's program is doing well," Thomas said. "So I'm told," Agatha replied, "though I question whether children that young truly understand the meaning of charitable giving." Thomas smiled. "You might be surprised. My daughters have taught me a lot about giving from the heart." The following day, Thomas attended a parent-teacher meeting at the girls' school. He no longer felt like an outsider as he chatted with other parents in the hallway. "Thomas, did Zoe tell you about making the advanced team?" Jennifer asked. The same mother who had once been cold to him now treated him like any other parent. "She mentioned it might happen," Thomas replied. "She's very excited." "Your donation for the new science lab equipment arrived," Mrs. Rodriguez, the principal, told him as she passed by. "Thank you for supporting our STEM program." "I'm glad to help," Thomas said. He had kept his word about donating anonymously. The equipment was listed as coming from a parent supporter. When Thomas arrived at Sarah's apartment for Wednesday dinner, he was surprised to see another car in the visitor parking space, a silver sedan he didn't recognize. Inside, the triplets were setting the table while Sarah cooked dinner with a man Thomas had never seen before. He was tall with gray-streaked dark hair and wore a doctor's white coat. "Thomas, you're here," Sarah said. "I'd like you to meet Mark Anderson. He's a pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital. Mark, this is Thomas Grant, the girl's father." Mark extended his hand with a friendly smile. "Nice to meet you, Thomas. The girls have told me a lot about you." Thomas shook his hand, feeling a strange twist in his stomach. "Good things, I hope?" "Mostly," Mark said with a laugh. During dinner, Thomas watched Mark interact with the family. He was clearly comfortable with the girls and knew details about their lives. Zoe showed him her latest artwork. Zara asked him questions about medicine. Even Zoe seemed relaxed around him. "How long have you two been seeing each other?" Thomas asked Sarah when the girls were clearing the dishes. "About a month," Sarah replied. "We met at a school function. His son is in the same grade as the girls." Thomas nodded. "He seems nice." "He is," Sarah said simply. Later, as Thomas prepared to leave, Mark approached him. "I want you to know I understand your relationship with the girls is primary," Mark said. "I'm not trying to replace you in any way." Thomas appreciated the gesture, though he still felt uneasy. "Thank you. Their happiness is what matters most." The following weekend, Thomas met with his therapist, Dr. Chen. "I felt jealous," Thomas admitted, "seeing another man so comfortable with my family." "Your family?" Dr. Chen repeated. Thomas paused. "You're right. Sarah isn't my partner anymore. She deserves happiness." "How will you handle these feelings going forward?" Dr. Chen asked. "I'll focus on being a good co-parent," Thomas said. "What matters is that the girls have stable, loving adults in their lives." As the triplets' 10th birthday approached, preparations intensified. Thomas transformed the guest room in his apartment for their first overnight stay. He bought new pajamas in their favorite colors and stocked the refrigerator with their preferred foods. "Are you nervous about the sleepover?" Sarah asked when he picked up the girls for their regular weekend visit. "Terrified," Thomas admitted. "What if something goes wrong?" Sarah smiled. "You'll be fine. They're excited about it." "Thank you for trusting me with this," Thomas said. "You've earned it," Sarah replied. "You've been consistent for 6 months now. That means a lot to them, and to me." That night, as Thomas helped the girls plan their birthday celebration, he realized how much his life had changed in half a year. His company was struggling with the transition, but he had no regrets. Some of his board members still resisted the Boston move, but Thomas remained firm in his decision. "Can we have a movie night during our sleepover?" Zoe asked. "And make popcorn?" Zara added. "With extra butter," Zoe specified. Thomas smiled at his daughters. "We can do all of that and more. This birthday will be special because we'll be together." Zoe looked at him thoughtfully. "Will you still be here for our next birthday? And the one after that?" The question revealed her lingering fear that he might leave again. Thomas met her eyes. "I promise I will be here for every birthday, every school event, every ordinary Tuesday, for the rest of my life." For the first time, Zoe seemed to fully believe him. The morning of the triplets' 10th birthday arrived with perfect summer sunshine. Thomas woke at 5 o'clock to prepare his apartment for the celebration. He had spent days transforming the space into 3 distinct areas based on each girl's interests. In the living room, he created an art corner for Zoe with easels, paints, and a display wall for finished projects. The dining area became a sports zone for Zoe with small games and soccer-themed decorations. The balcony was set up as a science lab for Zara, complete with safe experiments and microscopes. By 9 o'clock, Thomas was arranging food when his doorbell rang. It was Sarah, carrying a large cake box. "I stayed up until midnight finishing this," she said. opening the box to reveal a 3-layer cake. Each layer had different decorations: art supplies on top, sports equipment in the middle, and science symbols on the bottom. "It's perfect," Thomas said. "The girls will love it." Sarah looked around the apartment. "Wow, you really went all out with the decorations." "Too much?" Thomas asked nervously. Sarah smiled. "No, it's wonderful. They'll remember this birthday forever." They worked together, arranging snacks and hanging the last streamers. Their cooperation showed how far they had come as co-parents. "Mark is coming later for the cake cutting," Sarah mentioned casually. Thomas nodded. "That's fine. He's important to you, so he should be here." At 11 o'clock, the first guests arrived. School friends, teachers, and neighbors who had supported the family over the years. The triplets greeted everyone excitedly, wearing new dresses in their signature colors. "Thomas let us sleep in his room last night," Zoe told her art teacher proudly. "We stayed up until 10:30 watching movies. He made pancakes shaped like our initials this morning," Zara added. Mrs. Rodriguez, the school principal, approached Thomas. "It's wonderful to see how well you've integrated into the girls' lives. Sarah did an amazing job as a single parent, but the girls clearly benefit from having you present now too." Thomas smiled. "I'm trying to make up for lost time." Jennifer, once his harshest critic among the parents, gave him an approving nod. "You've proven me wrong, and I'm glad about that." The party was in full swing when an unexpected guest arrived. Agatha Williams stood at the door holding 3 large, expensively wrapped presents. The room fell quiet as people recognized her. "I hope I'm not intruding," Agatha said. "I wanted to bring gifts for the birthday girls." Thomas recovered quickly. "Please come in, Mrs. Williams." The triplets approached cautiously, remembering their last encounter with this woman who had humiliated them at church. "Happy birthday, girls," Agatha said with a tight smile. "I brought you each something special." She handed them the presents. "Go ahead, open them." The girls looked at each other, then at Sarah and Thomas, who nodded permission. Inside the packages were extravagant gifts: a professional art tablet for Zoe that cost hundreds of dollars, expensive soccer equipment for Zoe, and an advanced science kit for Zara. "These are very nice," Zoe said politely. Agatha smiled triumphantly. "Much better than those little trinkets from the discount store, I imagine," she said, nodding toward the table of more modest gifts from school friends. The room grew uncomfortable. Parents exchanged glances, remembering the church incident. The triplets looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. Then Zoe stepped forward. "Thank you for the gifts, Mrs. Williams," she said in a clear voice. "But the best presents aren't always the most expensive ones." Zoe nodded. "My favorite gift today was the handmade card my friend Emma made. She spent hours on it." Zara added, "We've learned that real giving comes from the heart, not the wallet." Agatha's smile disappeared. "Well, I just thought, gee, we appreciate your gesture," Zoe continued kindly. "But maybe you could donate to the church's children's program instead? That would help lots of kids learn about giving." Agatha looked stunned. She glanced around the room, noticing everyone watching. "Perhaps I should leave," she said stiffly. "You're welcome to stay for cake," Thomas offered. "No, thank you," Agatha replied. She left quickly, clearly affected by the children's mature response. After she left, the party continued. The children played in each themed area, especially enjoying the science experiments on the balcony. When it was time for cake, everyone gathered around the table. Sarah lit 10 candles on each layer while Thomas stood beside her. Mark had arrived and stood nearby, watching with a warm smile. "Make a wish," Sarah told the girls as they prepared to blow out the candles together. After cake and presents, the guests gradually departed. In a quiet moment, Sarah found Thomas in the kitchen. "You did an amazing job with the party," she said. "We both did," Thomas replied. "Co-parenting is working well, isn't it?" Sarah nodded. "The girls are thriving," They're more confident now that you're consistently in their lives." Thomas looked through the doorway at his daughters playing with their new gifts. "I almost missed this, Sarah. All these years I thought success meant making more money, building a bigger company. I was so wrong." "You figured it out eventually," Sarah said. "That's what matters." Later that afternoon, the birthday celebration moved to St. Matthew's Church for a special ceremony. The renovations were complete, and the new children's giving program was being officially launched. The church looked beautiful. Sunlight streamed through the new stained glass windows, and the repaired roof no longer leaked. The structural issues had been fixed, making the historic building safe for another generation. Pastor Wilson welcomed everyone to the sanctuary. "Today we celebrate not only the restoration of our building but the renewal of our community spirit." The triplets sat in the front row with Thomas and Sarah on either side of them. Mark sat next to Sarah, while several school friends and their families filled nearby pews. "The Johnson Grant family's journey represents what we hope to teach in our new children's program," Pastor Wilson continued. "That genuine giving, whether of money, time, or forgiveness, comes from the heart." Eleanor stood up to explain the new program. "Children will learn that every contribution matters, regardless of size. They'll experience the joy of helping others without expectation of reward." Pastor Wilson invited the triplets forward. "These young ladies will help cut the ribbon on our new program space." Their experience inspired its creation. The girls proudly held the large scissors together and cut the ribbon across the doorway of the newly renovated children's room. Thomas watched with pride as his daughters led younger children into the space, showing them the activities planned for the program. The triplets had grown so much in the past 6 months, not just physically, but in confidence and character. Across the room, Thomas noticed Agatha Williams sitting quietly in a back pew. She had returned for the ceremony despite the earlier awkwardness. When she saw him looking, she gave a small, almost apologetic nod. As the celebration continued, Thomas found himself standing with Mark while Sarah helped the girls demonstrate an activity. "Your daughters are remarkable," Mark said. "Yes, they are," Thomas agreed. "Sarah did an incredible job raising them." "She speaks highly of how you've stepped up these past months," Mark told him. "She appreciates your commitment." Thomas nodded. "We all want what's best for the girls." The afternoon sun began to set, casting colorful patterns through the stained glass windows onto the children gathered below. Thomas watched as his daughters moved confidently among the younger kids, helping them understand the simple giving projects. Pastor Wilson approached Thomas. "Your generosity made this possible, but your example might be even more valuable. These children are learning important lessons about second chances and redemption." "I'm the one who learned the biggest lesson," Thomas replied, "that being present for the people you love is the greatest success anyone can achieve." As the event ended, Thomas, Sarah, and Mark gathered the triplets to head home. The girls were tired but happy after their big day. "Can we have our next sleepover at your place next weekend?" Zoe asked Thomas as they walked toward the church exit. "If your mom agrees," Thomas said, looking at Sarah. Sarah smiled. "I think that would be fine." Outside, the summer evening was warm and pleasant. Thomas watched as his daughters walked ahead, talking excitedly about their day. "Thank you for sharing them with me," he said quietly to Sarah. "They need you in their lives," Sarah replied simply. "We all figured that out eventually." As they reached the parking lot, the girls turned back. "This was the best birthday ever," Zoe declared. "Because we were all together," Zara added thoughtfully. Zoe, who had been the most resistant to Thomas's return, looked at him directly. "Will it always be like this now? All of us as a family, even if it's different from other families?" Thomas knelt down to meet her eyes. "Yes, Zoe. This is our family now. Different maybe, but strong and permanent. I promise." For the first time, Zoe initiated a hug with her father. Wrapping her arms around his neck, Thomas held her close, his heart full beyond measure. In that moment, as the setting sun cast golden light over his daughters, Thomas realized he had found something his billions could never buy: the simple, profound joy of being a father, truly present in his children's lives. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.